Wait, that's how this ends? Ugh. Oh, hey everyone, Justin again. As you can see, our penultimate escape room is basically just a library. I'm not sure how to escape here, so I guess I'll just start another book. It's boring. Oh, I know this is going to be too long. Okay, here we go. Ooh, now that is a good beginning. I wonder how it ends. Oh, hey, I found today's challenge. Can you create a successful start and an effective ending for your novel? The beginning and ending are two of the most important scenes we'll write, and with all we've learned so far, we're ready for the challenge. Today, we'll look at how beginning and ending scenes impact readers, as well as a few common approaches to create them. Later, you'll write the beginning and ending of your novel. So, let's begin! And end! If you've ever spent time browsing a library or a bookstore, you know that reading the first pages of a story can totally hook you in, or make you lose interest entirely. The same thing goes for endings. Like, I could think of some TV shows where the season finale ruined the whole show for me, and some where the ending was just, perfect. How about you? What are the best and worst beginnings and endings you've ever encountered in a story? Pause to jot down some ideas in your guided notes. Clearly, our first and last impressions play a big role in how we feel about a story overall. In Unit 2, you planned what happens during your story's beginning and end, so you already know the basic story elements involved. But the craft of writing is more than just what happens. It's how we present what happens by making intentional choices to grab our readers' attention on the first page and to reward them on the last one. So let's begin by looking at beginnings. There are so many ways to begin a novel. So how can we be intentional about it? Well, just like any skill in our written craft toolbox, let's first pay attention to the reader's experience. At the beginning of a novel, readers have the lowest level of investment. They haven't spent any time reading, so they don't know anything yet, and they don't really care. They're looking for a reason to get invested, something that hooks them in and captivates their interest. That's why we'll emphasize a particular element of our story to get readers invested. We'll consider 3 approaches for beginning scenes that can showcase our conflict, our setting, or our characters. The first approach is called in medias res, which means in the middle of things. It's a technique where the story begins right in the middle of the action, while the exposition comes later. For example, sometimes a story starts with a tense situation, then the character says something like, "You're probably wondering how I ended up here." Then we flash back to earlier context to see why and how this happened. So you might choose to begin in medias res if you want to establish an intriguing conflict or set a fast pace for readers to follow. Another approach for a beginning scene is setting focused. This approach starts with important backstory, context, or world building to set the scene. For example, if your story setting is a national park, you could begin with a vivid description of the place, or share an intriguing legend about it. Then zoom in on your protagonist living within that context. A setting-focused beginning is great if you want to quickly immerse readers in the world of your story and to create strong sensory details that help them imagine it. One more approach to consider is a character-focused beginning, which prioritizes strong characterization to get readers invested. Depending on your story's point of view, this could happen a few different ways. Maybe your protagonist speaks directly to the reader in their own unique voice, Or maybe readers witness them saying or doing something that emphasizes their personality, emotions, or struggles. You might choose this approach to showcase your compelling characters and their story arcs. And if your readers will be following a particular character closely, you'll want to make sure they're intrigued by this fictional person. Now that we've learned about a few possible approaches, think about your story's beginning. How will you get your readers invested? In your guided notes, pause to consider your intentions for your novel's beginning scene. Which approach might work best, and why? Our stories have officially begun. How will they end? We know that at the beginning of a novel, our goal is to get readers invested. But what do we want them to feel at the end? How do you feel when you're reaching the end of a really good story? By the end of a novel, readers have read tens of thousands of words. They've invested their time and emotion. Readers want to feel like that investment was worth it, thanks to a satisfying ending. And they might also want to stay in the story. They'll feel reluctant to let it end. That's why an effective ending helps readers do two things: think back and think more. It reminds readers what they've enjoyed about the story, and it gives them something to ponder after they close the book. Like beginnings, there are multiple ways to approach an ending scene depending on your intentions. We'll look at three of them: epilogues, ambiguous endings, and callbacks. The first ending approach we'll consider is an epilogue. It's a brief scene or summary that takes place after the main story ends and shows what happens long term. For example, in an epilogue, the characters might be much older and wiser, when the events of the main story are just a memory. Both characters and readers can think back on the novel from a thoughtful, sentimental distance. An epilogue also encourages readers to think more about how certain things persist or change over time. You might show, for example, how your protagonist still sometimes struggles with the same old fear, but deals with it differently now. Another approach is an ambiguous ending. This means readers aren't given a clear conclusion. Instead, it's left to their interpretation. For instance, consider an ending where the protagonist finally calls their crush to confess, but the story ends while the phone is still ringing. Readers don't know for sure whether the crush answers or what either person might say. An ambiguous ending allows space for readers to draw their own personal conclusions about the story. They'll think back on the events that led up to the ending and think more about the story's unresolved questions and possible answers. Finally, your story's ending could include a callback. Callbacks are references to earlier details in the story, things that'll make readers go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Callbacks can reference a key phrase, event, object, location, or anything else that you'd like readers to remember. For example, let's say two characters first meet at a certain restaurant, and now in the ending scene, they're eating dinner at that same old restaurant. Callbacks like this help readers think back on important or nostalgic details from the story, and as they finish, they'll think more about the specific parts they enjoyed and will remember. So, what about your story's ending? What do you want readers to think back on and think more about? Pause to consider your intentions for your novel's ending scene. Which approach might work best and why? Nice work! You've put some intentional thought into your novel's beginning and its end. So, let's look at what's next. Challenge completed, another room down, we're almost to the top of the spire. And I am almost free from these harrowing escape rooms. I mean, I can't really complain about this one, actually. It's just books. Over the next few days, you'll plan and write the beginning or ending scene for your novel. Whichever one you don't choose now, you'll tackle next time as part of our final unit project. More on that later. Until then, keep writing. Your story is worth telling. See you next time.